What if the miracles of the Bible didn't contradict science, but revealed it in a supernatural way? The multiplication of the loaves, recorded in the Gospels, has always been seen as an absolute miracle, an act exclusively of divine power. However, what if behind this extraordinary event, there were natural laws that we still don't fully understand? Not to deny the miracle, but to show that God's power can operate through elements that science is only beginning to glimpse. In this study, we will embark on a journey where faith and science do not oppose each other, but intersect in a mysterious and fascinating way. After all, can science explain the unexplainable without taking away from God His glory? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This statement is not only the beginning of a sacred narrative, it is the introduction of a cosmic order grounded in laws and purpose. By declaring that the universe had a beginning, the Bible aligns with one of the pillars of modern science: time, space, and matter had a starting point. But what lies behind this creation? For many, the answer is purely divine. For others, it is scientific. What if both were correct? What if science is simply the way the Creator decided to organize His masterpiece? The Big Bang may describe the initial moment of the universe, but it does not explain who ignited it. The laws of physics describe the movements of the stars, but they do not reveal who wrote those laws. Creation is, in essence, the first miracle, and perhaps the greatest of all. The book of Genesis does not aim to be a scientific treatise, but it presents a surprisingly logical structure. There is an ordered progression: light, atmosphere, earth, plant life, stars, animal life, and finally, human beings. This order is not random. It reflects a plan, an intention. Each step sets the stage for the next, as if the Creator were laying the foundations for what was to come. And, interestingly, this order finds parallels in the cosmic evolution described by astrophysics. Could it be a coincidence? Or is it that science, when stripped of human pride, is merely slowly uncovering God's signature in the gears of the universe? The chemistry that governs cellular reactions, the physics that keeps the planets in orbit, the mathematics that structures the galaxies, all of this could be read as a reflection of the divine mind. But this raises a question: where does science end and where does the mystery begin? Throughout history, some have tried to separate faith and reason, as if they were opposing forces. However, many of the greatest scientists in human history, from Newton to Pascal, saw science as a way to glorify God. They did not study the world to deny the Creator, but to know Him better. Isaac Newton saw the laws of gravity as manifestations of divine order. Johannes Kepler stated that his mission was to think God's thoughts after Him. When science is practiced with humility, it does not compete with faith, it affirms it. After all, would it be reasonable to imagine such a well-structured universe coming about by chance? Even the most staunch atheists admit, there is an elegance in the cosmos that defies randomness. This elegance, for believers, has a name: God. But if He created everything with fixed laws, why does He sometimes choose to break them? This is where the concept of miracle begins to connect with science. A miracle, in the biblical sense, is not a denial of nature, it is a specific intervention by the Creator upon the rules He Himself established. Think of the universe as a grand symphony conducted by perfect laws. A miracle would be like the maestro interrupting the score to play a special note, unexpected, yet harmonious. The multiplication of the loaves, for example, does not challenge the logic that food does not appear out of nothing. But the same God who established the law of conservation of matter can also temporarily suspend it. This does not deny science. It transcends it. A miracle, therefore, is an intentional exception, not an error in the system. But are we prepared to accept that the supernatural can coexist with the natural? Thus, when we look at creation and science, we should not see them as conflicting forces but as parts of the same plan. Creation is the stage, science is the script, and God is the author. When we understand this, we realize that science does not steal God's glory, it reveals it. Every discovery, every proven theory, every deciphered formula is a window to contemplate the divine mind. And when events arise that science cannot explain, such as miracles, they do not push us away from reasoning, they invite us to reflect on the limits of human understanding in the face of an infinite creator. But if God is so perfectly logical, why does he still choose to act in ways that defy all logic? Miracles have always fascinated humanity. For many, they are undeniable signs of God's power. For others, they are extraordinary events that might one day be explained by science. But what if both perceptions are correct? What if miracles are not necessarily a violation of natural laws, but rather a superior expression of them, something that science does not yet have the tools to comprehend? When we read the Bible, we find events that defy logic: the sea that parts, water turning into wine, the dead coming back to life. But does God need to break his own laws to act? Or does he master them so perfectly that he can use them in ways we do not yet understand? Let's take the example of the crossing of the Red Sea. In Exodus 14, the text says, "The Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land." The miracle is clear, but the way it occurred is fascinating. God used wind, a natural element, to perform the miracle. The wind was just a tool, an agent under his command. Scientists today discuss the possibility that a strong, constant wind, under certain topographical conditions, could temporarily move the waters. Does this diminish the miracle? On the contrary. It reveals that God knows the structures of nature deeply and can use them to fulfill his purposes. The wonder is not just in the how, but in the when and the why. The precise timing, the impact on the people of Israel, the liberation from slavery, that is the complete miracle. Another example, the resurrection of Lazarus. A human body, after 4 days without life, would be in an advanced state of decomposition. There is no scientific explanation for someone returning to life after this time. Still, Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, and he comes out, alive. For current science, this is impossible. But the Bible does not deny physical death, it shows that there is someone with power over it. Medicine can prolong life, but it cannot restore it from nothing. At this point, the miracle breaks with what we know of biology, but it does not conflict with it, it merely transcends it. Thus, even when there is no plausible explanation, the absence of a scientific answer is not evidence of fraud, but of human limits. The question then becomes, how far can we go without losing faith? Miracles like these are not simple displays of power, but purposeful messages. They reveal the character of God, liberator, merciful, just. Jesus did not heal out of vanity or to challenge the Pharisees. He healed out of compassion. Science might, perhaps, one day explain how blind people began to see or how paralytics began to walk, but it will not explain the reason. And this is where the heart of the miracle lies: love. The motivation behind the supernatural act is as important as the act itself. Therefore, even when we encounter physical or natural theories that try to explain a miracle, faith invites us to look beyond. The phenomenon may be understood. The purpose, never. But is the modern world ready to accept that not everything needs to be quantifiable? When we view miracles in light of natural laws, we are not trying to diminish divine action, we are recognizing that God, as Creator, completely masters these laws. He can operate within them or beyond them, according to His will. If a healing happens suddenly and medicine cannot explain it, this does not deny medicine, it confirms that there is more to be known. If an event challenges scientific predictions, perhaps science is just being invited to grow. The miracle, then, can be seen as a point of intersection between the eternal and the temporal, a moment when God touches the world with His invisible hand, using the strings that He Himself created. But how many of these touches have already occurred without us noticing? Thus, the miracle is not the suspension of reality, it is the revelation of a higher reality. It does not deny human knowledge, it only shows that it is incomplete. When the Bible recounts miracles, it invites us to believe, not out of ignorance, but out of reverence. Science may try to decipher the how, but faith anchors itself in the who. And when science reaches its limit, the miracle begins. The coexistence of science and faith is not only possible, it is necessary. For while science seeks to understand the world, faith recognizes who made it. There is something profoundly spiritual in observing the laws of nature in action. Gravity keeps the planets in orbit. Photosynthesis sustains life. The water cycle feeds the fields and quenches the thirsty. Such processes do not happen by chance. They are expressions of order, intelligence, and constancy, qualities that reflect the character of God. Science, often viewed as a field separate from faith, can actually be a window into the Creator. When we dive into the study of natural laws, we are, in a way, reading the language with which God wrote the universe. Could it be that everything we understand as science is, in reality, the divine signature etched into the fabric of existence? The ancients already intuited this connection. The psalmist wrote, "The heavens declare the glory of God, the firmament proclaims the work of his hands," Psalm 19 verse 1. Long before telescopes and mathematical formulas, humanity looked to the sky and saw order. Today, we know that this order is sustained by physical laws, such as universal gravitation, quantum mechanics, and the principles of thermodynamics. And while these laws are precisely described by equations, their origin remains a mystery. Why does the universe obey such specific rules? Why do these laws function in such a perfectly tuned way for life? Science can describe these rules, but it cannot explain why they exist. Faith, on the other hand, points us to an answer, because the Creator is a God of order and purpose. This view sheds new light on miracles. A miracle, then, is not a break in the natural laws, but an unusual manifestation of a God who fully governs these laws. It's as if, for a brief moment, nature is invited to follow a path it does not normally take, but one that was already foreseen in the infinite knowledge of God. When Jesus walks on water, it's not that physics has been ignored, but that it was temporarily redirected by the one who created it. There is no disrespect for the laws, only a superior mastery over them. God is not limited by what we know, He is the source of what we have yet to understand. In fact, many great scientists in history believed this. Isaac Newton, Johannes Kepler, Blaise Pascal, all of them saw their discoveries as a way of drawing closer to God. To them, studying the natural world was an act of worship. They did not see a contradiction between science and faith because they knew the universe was not a cosmic accident, but an ordered creation. This understanding can change the way we look at the world. Every law of physics, every living cell, every distant star, everything becomes a testimony to the Creator. And when something seems to escape scientific explanation, it is not a defeat for knowledge, but a reminder that we are still discovering the ways of God. Even the most modern advances reveal this grandeur. When scientists decoded DNA, they found a system of information so complex that some compared it to genetic software. How could something so elaborate arise by chance? The mathematical probability of certain structures forming randomly is nearly impossible. And yet, there they are, functioning with precision, transmitting life, generating order. Science strives to describe the how, but the who continues to silently echo between the lines of knowledge. Therefore, instead of seeing science as the enemy of faith, we can view it as an ally. The microscope and the telescope do not steal God's glory, they amplify it. With each new discovery, we do not move further away from the divine, we move closer. God is not afraid of human investigation. On the contrary, He is the one who gave us curiosity and reason. And as we advance, we may realize that what we call natural law is, in fact, the science of God, a reflection of His creative mind, functioning in perfect harmony. But are we ready to accept that the invisible may be present even in what is explainable? Few miracles evoke as much fascination as the multiplication of the loaves and fish. In the midst of the desert, with thousands of hungry people, Jesus takes 5 loaves and 2 fish, prays to the heavens, and distributes enough food to satisfy the multitude, with 12 baskets left over. Was this a purely supernatural event, outside of natural laws, or was there some hidden mechanism behind this wonder? Were we witnessing an unknown physical phenomenon, a manifestation of divine science not yet understood, or was this a moment when heaven simply touched the earth? Some scholars have attempted rational explanations. Theories suggest that Jesus inspired the generosity of those present, and each person shared the little they had hidden, resulting in a collective abundance. Others propose less symbolic hypotheses, such as manipulation of time or space, in a sort of bending of physical reality. But all of these assumptions, while interesting, seem insufficient in light of the clear and detailed description in the Gospels. The account does not present metaphors, it is a direct and literal fact. The people saw, ate, and marveled. So how could science engage with this event? One possibility lies in the concept of the collapse of the natural function. If we admit that God created the laws that govern the universe, then he can, on rare occasions, intervene in them directly without nullifying them. It would be like a conductor who, deeply familiar with the musical score, chooses to momentarily alter the rhythm of the music. This intervention does not negate the natural laws, it simply transcends them. The multiplication of the loaves could thus be seen as an energetic or molecular manipulation made by the one who knows every atom of creation. Perhaps one day science will understand the mechanisms behind such an event, but this would not diminish its miraculous nature, it would merely confirm that God also works through logical paths. It is worth remembering that the miracle was preceded by a prayer. Jesus did not simply multiply the food, he gave thanks beforehand. This gesture indicates that the power involved is not only physical but profoundly spiritual. The miracle, in this case, is not only the material production of food but the entire context, the compassion, the teaching, the faith awakened, the symbolism of the bread of life. God does not perform miracles merely to impress, he performs them to teach, transform, and nourish both the body and the soul. God's presence is manifested in every detail, even in what we seek to explain with formulas and theories. The essential point is that, even in the face of possible scientific explanations, the miracle does not lose its divine essence. A lightning bolt can be explained by physics, but the beauty of a storm can still lead us to a spiritual experience. Similarly, if one day we understand the process that allowed the multiplication of the loaves, it will not nullify God's action. On the contrary, it may reveal his wisdom even more deeply. Science can show us how things happen. Faith shows us why they happen. And both, when properly understood, do not oppose each other, they complement each other. Finally, we must remember that the greatest miracle may not have been the multiplication of the loaves, but the transformation of hearts that day. Thousands of people, upon witnessing the power of God, came to believe. This cannot be reproduced in a laboratory, nor quantified in formulas. What happened in that desert was both an extraordinary physical phenomenon and an unprecedented spiritual revelation. The miracle is not only in the bread that multiplied, but in the mystery of a God who cares about the hunger of men, both of body and soul. And perhaps this is the greatest miracle of all, the love of God, working through invisible means, yet perfectly real. As we walk through the pages of the New Testament, we come across miracles that challenge the senses and human logic, blind people regaining sight, paralytics standing up, the dead returning to life. These accounts are not legends or metaphors, they are testimonies marked by faith and real impact. But in an era where science seeks explanations for everything, the inevitable question arises, is it possible that there is a harmony between these supernatural manifestations and the natural laws? Or is it that, in trying to understand them, we are attempting to decipher the unspeakable with limited tools? Let us take as an example the miracle of the healing of the man born blind, as reported in John 9. Jesus spits on the ground, makes mud with the dirt, and applies it to the man's eyes. After washing in the pool of Siloam, the man begins to see. Scientifically, would it be possible to reverse congenital blindness with mud and water? Literally, no. But what if this miracle is operating in a dimension where the limits of biology can be temporarily altered? Neuroscience and genetics have made great strides, revealing that nerve cells can be regenerated, that electrical impulses can restore lost functions. Could the healing, in this case, be a kind of cellular reprogramming? Perhaps. But this only reveals how much we still do not fully understand the mechanisms of creation, and who masters them. Another striking example is the resurrection of Lazarus. After being dead for 4 days, Jesus calls him out of the tomb. Modern medicine has already revived patients clinically dead for a few minutes, through cardiac resuscitation or induced hypothermia. But 4 days? This goes beyond all known physical limits. Decomposition would have already begun. Here, science finds no support. And it is precisely here that the miracle reaffirms itself, not as a denial of science, but as its momentary transcendence by the one who created it. The author of life can restore what is dead. The Creator can restart what seemed closed. Science, therefore, does not need to deny these miracles to maintain its integrity. On the contrary, when faith recognizes the limits of reason, and science admits the limits of its knowledge, a sacred space opens where both can coexist. Faith does not demand that we abandon reasoning, but that we complete it with hope and trust. And science, when humble, can point to something greater, a higher intelligence behind the order of the universe. This dialogue between faith and science is more necessary than ever. In times of growing skepticism, some see miracles as ancient tales, incompatible with modern thought. However, science itself advances through what it still does not understand. Theories are built on hypotheses, and the unknown is the engine of discovery. Similarly, faith advances by trusting in an invisible God, yet present in every detail of life. The miracles of the New Testament are not obstacles to science. They are invitations to reflection, humility, and the search for a truth that unites reason and spirituality. In the end, it is not about choosing between believing or understanding. It is about recognizing that believing is often the first step toward understanding. Jesus performed miracles not to prove his power, but to reveal his love. And even if science one day manages to explain some of these events, it will not make them any less miraculous. It will simply show us, more clearly, how deeply the divine mind is intertwined with the natural order. Faith and science, far from being rivals, can be allies in the revelation of the God who heals, transforms, resurrects, and who will never be limited by human formulas. No matter how much science advances, we still come up against an invisible wall, the limitation of the human mind. We decipher molecules, unravel galaxies, map DNA, but we still stumble upon simple questions like, why do we exist, or what happens after death? Science is powerful, but it is a tool, not the end. It is a magnifying glass, not the complete vision. When applied to spirituality, its instruments prove insufficient to measure that which is eternal, invisible, and transcendent. The attempt to explain God through equations is like trying to imprison the ocean within a cup. The pursuit is beautiful, but it is doomed to limitation. The miracles, the signs, the divine deeds, all point to something greater than our understanding can grasp. The Apostle Paul already said in his letter to the Corinthians that, now we see through a glass, darkly, but then face to face. In other words, we live today with glimpses of eternity, but not with its fullness. Let us take the very existence of the universe as an example. Science proposes the Big Bang as the beginning of everything. But what existed before? What caused the explosion? And why did something come from nothing? These are questions that touch the limits of human reasoning and demand more than theory, they demand faith. The most logical answer may be the most divine, an intentional, eternal creator, outside of time and space, who began everything with purpose and order. This limitation, far from being a weakness, is what makes humanity deeply spiritual. Recognizing that we do not have all the answers leads us to humility, and it is in this humble space that God reveals himself. He is not hidden because he fears being discovered. He is concealed because he desires to be sought with the heart, not just with the brain. When Jesus performed miracles, he never explained his methods. He didn't say, watch how I manipulate the particles, but simply said, go, or rise, and the impossible happened. This simplicity confuses the wise, but nourishes the humble. He knew that the greatest miracle was not physical healing, but the transformation of the soul. And this transformation can never be measured by lab tests or mathematical formulas. The role of science is to serve humanity with discoveries, cures, solutions. But the role of faith is to give meaning to all of this. Science answers the how, faith answers the why. Both are necessary, but only faith transcends death, pain, and emptiness. And that is exactly why, even in times of super technology, many still seek prayer, silence, and the supernatural. There is something within us that cries out for eternity, and only God answers. Thus, we conclude, science is a reflection of the intelligence given by God to humanity. It is a blessing, a tool. But it is not God. It never will be. The mystery of creation, the breath of life, the everyday and extraordinary miracles, all of these remind us that there is a creator above creation. And even when science tries to explain the unexplainable, it will only touch the surface of a God who is infinite, personal, and sovereign. The human mind is limited, but the heart can intuit what the eyes cannot see. The universe is too vast to be random, and miracles are too real to be mere coincidence. Science is good, but God is eternal. And between the two, there is space to believe, study, admire, and never stop seeking. In the end, the question and the mystery remain: can a miracle be explained without ceasing to be a miracle? Perhaps yes, perhaps no. But one certainty remains: behind every explanation, there is still God. Always greater. Always beyond.